The big news of the last week or so was, of course, the show-busy launch of the Samsung Galaxy S4 in New York. With the same form factor as the S3, Samsung has squeezed in a 5-inch 1080p display. It's pen-tiled but with an improved layout, so should be fine. Depending on where you are in the world, you get a Snapdragon 600 or octa-core Exynos processor plus 2GB of RAM, various internal disk sizes plus microSD, and of course you get that fabulous replaceable battery, now up to 2600 mAh. Everything else is as expected, including a 13 megapixel camera, don't get too excited, NFC, and with an optional replacement pack, even wireless charging. There are loads of TouchWiz software gimmicks, features added in too, messing around with camera functionality, adding multi-device music playback, translation and driving apps, pausing movie playback when you stop looking at the phone, and much more. Overall, I'm sceptical about the extras. Most Galaxy S3 owners I know hardly touch any of that device's extras. Still, as a device, the S4 looks pretty desirable. Now, where's that copy of Launcher Pro? What we have here is a Star Trek Next Gen pad, or at least it's close to what you see on the show, and it feels like it's, well, from the future. The materials, the design, the build quality here on the HTC One are a generational leap on from anything else I've seen anywhere in the phone world. I mean, I've admitted to being something of a metal fetishist before, and we've seen a few metal phones previously, Nokia N8 for example. They all had weak points, plastic end caps for the antennae and so on. We've seen ergonomic designs that fit the hand well from different people. We've seen phones that are super well built and last for many years. But this is, I think, the very first time that all of these attributes have been seen in one device. And that it's a flagship with faster processor than anything else currently in existence and several unique features just adds to the One's charm. Wow, now don't switch off. Steve hasn't done a complete about turn on everything he holds dear. There are still things here that I don't like about the HTC One, but I had to really think about mentioning them, so struck am I by how superb this feels in the hand. Machined from a single block of aluminium, Apple style, this feels like a sister product to a MacBook, and if possible more Apple-like than the iPhone itself. The RF problem is solved by putting the antennae in injection molded plastic inserts and special channels all around the outside and around the back. It's not clear exactly where each antenna is, but they all do seem to work. The super LCD display here is superb in terms of colour and resolution. 1080p resolution, contrast, viewing angle and outdoor readability, and is flanked by another unique feature, front-mounted stereo speakers. Now, I've had loud stereo before, for example on this Nokia X6, my previous audio champion. Here's a demo. It's just very, very crisp and it's very loud. And now let's try the same song on the HTC One with default settings. Here we go. I'd say the HTC One just edges it. It's not quite as loud, but much higher quality. And having both speakers facing my ears directly with the extra stereo separation, for example, in music videos, is simply a treat. And then you can turn on Beats Audio. Let's try that. Yes, I know it's a set of volume and EQ software tricks, but they do seem to make the most of the hardware here. Another interesting bit of tech in the HTC One is its camera, bucking the trend for squeezing ever smaller pixels into a tiny 1/3 of an inch sensor. HTC has limited it to 4 megapixels, a largish f/2.0 aperture, and they've given it optical image stabilization like on the Nokia Lumia 920, ensuring that it produces pretty good results without needing flash in some low light conditions, for example indoors. All of this is so that we can get to this. Now this is a typical shot from last weekend. I won't get up close for privacy reasons, but this and this and this and this, it's Zoe burst mode. You can really get the expression you want very, very close with human subjects. The One shoots in Zoe mode, short for zoetrope, capturing 8 photos before you press the shutter icon, i.e. it's capturing all the time, and 16 after, plus a short bit of video to give you an overview. What this means is that when shooting kids and toddlers, for example, who are utterly unpredictable, you can wait for a moment of magic and then touch the Zoe shutter icon, safe in the knowledge that you haven't missed the moment. Later, you scroll through the Zoe burst photos, as I showed you earlier. I just remember they're all buffered all the time, even before you tap to take the shot. And look, some magical expressions there in the midst. Just crop a little and share or fire off by email as needed. I've previously sworn by Xenon Flash as a way to grab magic moments, but this Zoe burst mode, allied with how good the camera is on the HTC One, has really got me thinking. I can see how this might get better shots of kids for me more consistently than my Nokia 808. Admittedly, in terms of raw image quality, the HTC One shots are a bit disappointing if you look closely, but they're very crisp if you view them as a whole. And with the Zoe burst mode available too, this should really fire many people's imaginations and enable some very satisfying photos, especially of people, pets, and well, anything that moves quickly. Another unique thing about the HTC One is the processor used inside. I don't normally fuss about these things, but there's a quad-core Snapdragon 600 inside. That's basically the very latest and greatest. Along with 2 gigabytes of RAM, this thing flies. The Verge's homepage is the ultimate example of bloat on the web, yet it loads here in about 5 or 6 seconds, which isn't much slower than my mains-powered desktop. In today's web-obsessed world, bandwidth permitting, you can pretty much hit any URL you want with this without having to stop and wait for things to render. You do get 2 web browsers, rather intriguingly. HTC would do well to ditch the old Android browser, just labelled Internet here, and stick to Chrome. In the meantime, users are going to get a bit confused. HTC's Sense skin here is much lighter than it used to be, but the way you scroll through apps or add widgets or apps or shortcuts, everything's just a little different to stock Android, but I can live with it. This first home screen is titled Blink Feed and can't be removed. It's a visual amalgam of your social feeds and the news sources of your choice, and it works pretty well. Think Flipboard in your 99% there. You can't add RSS feeds of your own choice. All sources have to be HTC approved. Still, it's pretty, it's fast, and it defaults to only updating over Wi-Fi, which is very sensible. Android 4.1.2 underpins all of this, along with a 32 gigabyte internal disk. It's non-expandable, but I do think this should be enough for most people. Also sealed is the 2300 mAh battery. I easily got through a day with brightness set down to auto, but as ever I do worry for users a year down the line when the battery is down to around 70% capacity. Still, my appreciation for the aluminium unibody here overrides my worries, this time at least. After my scorn for the Xperia Z stamina mode in the last phone show, I guess I should also criticise the power saver options here, but they're lower profile and they don't seem to be needed to quite the same degree. In addition to the usual Android core apps, there's the 7 Digital Music Store and the HTC Watch Movie Store here, neither of which are likely to see much use given the standard Google Play apps also built in, plus this rather splendid kid mode, aka Zoodles, with loads of small kid-friendly games and video content. I guess the idea here is to keep a child happy in a queue or on a car journey, though do note that the video resources this sometimes needs might bump up your data bill a bit. To get out, as a parent, there are various options, including as here, as tracing out the secret gesture. HTC's trademark weather system is here in a large widget and application form, plus a few useful extras. Tune-in radio and SoundHound, plus the full Polaris Office editing suite. Very nice. Plus, of course, you can add all the other usual Android apps you care to try or buy. However, I guess you're all waiting for the Steve but moment. Well, here it is. Just as on last year's One X and sister devices, the only way to wake the screen here on the HTC One is using the button at the left edge of the top face of the device. Now, with my hands, I can just about stretch my index finger up to turn the HTC One on with one hand and then contort and manipulate the phone in my hand to swipe up to unlock the screen. It's not impossible, but please, HTC, please, follow Samsung and Nokia and many others and see sense. Put the power button on the side where lesser mortals can just reach it far more easily. As it is with the 4.7-inch screen, the HTC One becomes, well, it's a two-handed device much of the time. Talking of buttons, I thought the switch to only 2 Android control buttons here at the bottom would annoy me, but I actually got used to it very quickly. Double tap the home button to bring up the multitasking of recent apps, thumbnail menu, and so on. Works pretty well, though I didn't like having to long press the home button to get Google Now. Maybe this should have been optionally assigned as a double tap action for the back soft key. Not having a Samsung or gingerbread menu key here is still catching some apps out, for example here in Twitter, and rather showing up Twitter and Facebook's programmers. In each you lose a lot of screen real estate down at the bottom here to an almost completely pointless menu shortcut. Just put the flipping thing up in the top bar, for example. One final feature that some reviews will mention is the infrared blaster built into the top button. It worked okay for my TV, but failed miserably for my main Freeview box, the one that actually controls all the digital channels. So I'm not qualified to say whether it's any good or not. Maybe it works better with equipment in the USA and Taiwan. It's a measure of how much the HTC One has won me over that, despite the usual HTC Sense additions, despite the sealed battery and memory, despite the top-mounted power button, I still found myself wanting to hang on to this thing beyond the review period. Now, the Galaxy S4 will be here for review in a couple of shows' time, but until then, I have absolutely no hesitation in proclaiming the HTC One a design classic, a strong top 5 contender for me personally, and the best Android-powered smartphone in the world right now.